Hey, it's Charlton from the Sol Quartet, and this is an Angel Island bonus episode. The concept for the Angel Island Oratorio was born out of our existing relationship with composer Huang Ruo. I was always impressed by his artful and idiomatic style of setting Chinese text to music, and I had been thinking about Angel Island for years, so it made sense that we would work together on this project. We recorded our interview with Huang Ruo for Sounds Current in our friend Susan's New York apartment while we were there for our Angel Island performances in the 2024 Next Wave Festival, co-presented by Brooklyn Academy of Music and Prototype Festival. We decided to share the full interview here so you can follow the evolution of our collaboration from the first time we met through the dark times of the COVID pandemic all the way to New York. Of course, you can follow Huang Ruo's work at huangruo.com, including the world premiere of his new opera, The Monkey King, written with David Henry Hwang at the San Francisco Opera in November of 2025, linked for you in the episode description in your listening app. And now, here's my conversation with Huang Ruo. So we can start by, if you can just say your name and who you are.
Hello everyone, my name is Huang Ruo, composer and conductor of our New York premiere of Angel Island at BAM and Prototype Festival.
Okay. And maybe, I know you've talked about this a lot, but can you talk about the first time that we met at CMA, however many years ago that was?
Yeah, I don't quite remember exactly which year that was.
It was when Calligraffiti premiered.
Right.
Was that 12?
12?
10?
Could be 12 or 13.
Copyright 2010. So maybe it was 2011?
2011? January of 2011? Okay. Well, we could say we met then.
Close enough.
Yeah. So I think it was January of 2011, CMA conference. I just wandered into this exhibition room where different chamber music ensembles or organizations having a booth to exhibit CDs and all kinds of stuff. And then I think consciously I was looking for, is there any other Asian Americans around in the room? I only found one, and that was Charlton. I believe we even spoke a little bit of Mandarin, a few words.
I attempted to.
You attempted to. Well, but I immediately draw to, after talking with you, and then I think that evening I had Kiera Quartet premiere of my third string quartet called Calligraffiti, which we received a CMA commission grant for. And Charlton also came to that concert. And then I believe you reached out to me afterwards. We started our conversation on collaboration after that. So
yeah, and it's kind of a funny coincidence that Young Yoon, who is now in Del Sol,
right,
was the violinist for Kiara at the time.
That's right.
So
that's
now
right.
We can claim that Calligraffiti was premiered by us too.
Partially. Yeah.
Partially. Yeah, no, that's great.
And then I believe the Sol Quartet played Calligraffiti also, right?
Yes, we played.
Did you also play the Flag Project? I don't quite remember.
We were working on that.
Okay.
And then the pandemic hit.
Right.
And then we changed.
Yeah. So, but also in 2014, the Sol Quartet was engaged and also performed some of my chamber music as part of concerts at Santa Fe Opera, gearing towards the U.S. premiere of Dr. Sun Yat-sen, which is my first opera. So yeah, so we have been collaborating since more than 10 years ago now, I should say.
Right. No, I love that particular concert where we did Flow, or is it Flow 2?
Flow 1 and 2.
Yeah, and we didn't need all of us for that piece, but then you invited two of us to come sing with you, which was really fun.
That's right.
It was my first opportunity to behave like a rock star. What about when we began to talk to you about the idea of using the poetry on Angel Island?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of went through your mind when we talked about that?
I saw the poems in both Chinese and also English. Obviously, the Chinese original version, since I could read it as a first-hand person, I understand the language. It does strike me very emotionally and very deeply of the feelings and expressions of whoever wrote the poem. Each of them actually has very similar things to say. Is their feeling of sadness, anger, homesickness and hopelessness. So all this was shown in almost every poem. There's no one poem is happy, I should say. And there are quite a lot of poems in the book. And they were all from the Angel Island, the place where the Chinese immigrants were detained. Now it's a museum now.
Yeah, the detention center.
That's right.
I remember some of the poems at least had some expressed maybe some hopes and desires, perhaps unfulfilled, but that they were coming with some kind of hope for a new life.
Yeah. Well, the book itself actually was categorized in different chapters, which I also followed the chronological order. But in the poetry book, it also has Arrival. It also has Life on Angel Island. It also has Departure. So it grouped the poems in different category. So for me, I also used that chronological order, and I picked 4 poems. The first one is about Arrival. And that one actually, to me, has more lightness in it, because whoever wrote that did not really started living life on Angel Island for too long yet. So you still see this kind of talking about the ocean, talking about the water, talking about the wave, talking about in front of that person is this wooden building, right? So it did not talk about the life or what's in the building yet. And the second poem is about someone's life on the island, has been for quite a long time. So that person, you could definitely felt was very angry, even tried to take revenge. So that was the second poem. The third poem is about someone died, and this person's friends wrote this poem in memory of the deceased person. And that was very, very mournful and quite sad. And the last poem, which was quite interesting, because that was the poem I picked when we first tried to find one poem to demonstrate on the island, improvise. So I went back to that poem without remembering that was the poem actually I picked originally. So it's about departure from the island, and it's called The Ocean Encircling the Lone Peak. And what's very interesting is now I heard back the clip when we improvised, what I sung in the barrack versus what I wrote now as the scene 8. They are so different, but they both are original in their own way. Yeah.
Can you talk about how the immigration stories of these detainees relate to maybe resonate with your own immigration story? I mean, obviously you are an immigrant as well. And fortunately you didn't have to go through that process, but still.
I should say, the feeling of coming into a new place without knowing what is waiting ahead of you, the sense of unknown and the sense of homesickness, that I can relate quite closely. And in the States for this long now, sometimes, we do experience discrimination, and those kind of feeling, even in modern day, still exists in our society. So I could not imagine what they went through. And of course, I did not try to recreate their feelings, try to speak as who they are, because I could not. But I could only write this work as someone who looked back from who I am and where I am today, to try to tell their story through my own voice in hope to have their words to be heard and let the words themselves to speak for themselves.
You talk a little bit about the first time that you came to the island and stepped from taking the ferry to stepping on the island, then coming into the detention center building. What was that like?
I remember we woke up quite early, and the ferry ride, it was quite magical in that sense. It's quite scenic. You could see the Golden Gate Bridge from afar. The island was surrounded by fog. And when we stepped onto the island, the sun comes out. So what was quite a beautiful outdoor place to visit, I should say. Then I walk all the way to the detention center, which now is a museum. I think only when you enter the building, the reality hits you. And the museum did a great job of preserving the wall, the metal pole, and also the bed, right? You could see how the detainees were living. So many people in one room, and even visited the bathroom. Also saw the characters on the wall. They were still there even after this many years. So it's kind of a very contrary feeling, outside and inside. And I look out from the barrack. You could still see some wire, I think was installed there in the past to prevent people to escape. And you look out to the ocean through the wire, through the window, and then you see the Bay Area in San Francisco. Maybe that resembling freedom for the detainees. That's where they want to be. They could see that. They could see the lights. They could almost they could feel the heartbeat of that city, but they were remained and contained on this island, not able to go set foot on that free land. Yeah, so I think, again, I could not imagine exactly what they went through, but I think it must be, lonely and sad after, being detained for such a period of time and not knowing what their fate would be. But of course, most of them got sent back to where they came from. Not really?
Actually, it turned out that most of them did make it in.
Okay, good.
Because largely from what I understand, because they were so well prepared.
Oh, I see.
They actually...
They passed the exam.
A lot of them did wind up passing, but it took a long time.
I see.
And many of them, they knew, the Chinese, because the Chinese knew how much difficulty they were facing.
I see.
They prepared like studying for national exam kind of thing, right? And so
I just remember reading this New York Times article of, I think there was one family, because of the Page Act, the father could not bring the mother in, so that they pretend the mother to be the aunt.
That was Nellie and Flo Huang, the two sisters, the two poets.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
that was their
mother. That
was
their mother. And then, which poet was only 3-year-old at that time? And they trained the 3-year-old to say yi means aunt instead of say mom, right? So that was just heartbroken too. You cannot call your mother, right? You need to call her.
And then on
aunt.
top of that, the mother can't just start having babies, so then she had to marry somebody else to make it look official.
To make it look official, yeah.
It's crazy. We were originally planning to premiere Angel Island in 2020, and of course, that was the dark days of the pandemic. And instead, you wrote this incredibly beautiful meditation, A Dust in Time. So at the time when we were supposed to premiere Angel Island, we were able to perform A Dust in Time instead. Mm-hmm. And we did that outdoors and in a really special, just like in a nice setting in San Francisco. And people came out in their masks, and it was quite an experience. What was that like to write Dust in Time during, this same period when you were originally going to premiere Angel Island?
When the pandemic started in March of 2020, I fell into this dark hole, the black hole of numbness and hopelessness, of not knowing what the future lays. All the performances were cancelled, and everyone stays home. So I could not write regularly as what I planned. And I decided I want to just write a piece about how I felt. In a way, it's not to any specific artist as a commission, but because it's not for any artist, specifically. It is for every artist. So I wrote this piece called A Dust in Time as a meditation to help me to get out of that stage of numbness and hopelessness. So every day I was sitting there and writing. Every day I was working. I spent several months working on A Dust in Time until I had roughly 60 minutes of music. And it was inspired by the Tibetan Zen mandala, the structure, which a perfect, beautiful, colorful world is created, unfolding, is completed, and then that is only the first half of it. The second half is you need to erase that. You need to vanish that world, to let go of it, and to go back to where you started, which is nothing. But throughout that entire journey, you gain something. You gain the ability to let go of the most precious thing for you. And only once you learn the act of let go, you could gain the heart of compassion. So that was the purpose of A Dust in Time, and the structure of A Dust in Time has 13 sections, and section 7 being the central section, being the peak of creating the world, and then from section 7 onwards to 13 is the erase or diminish of the world. So you return backwards to where we started. So I wrote the piece. It only exists in MIDI form. Every night I just listen to the MIDI playback and go to sleep, And one day I remember we were talking, and to my surprise, you told me that you guys were still together and rehearse in person. I think either you or Catherine offered to read A Dust in Time to me. I was so touched by that because it has been several months and I never heard anything performed live, not to mention my own music. So I sent you what I have, and we had a Zoom rehearsal. And I remember once I heard the section you played for me, I was in tears, because that human desire of to connect, wanting to connect, wanting to be heard, wanting to create together, it was so strong, and even we are so far away, but it was so close. The pandemic, to me, it was a great learning experience. I walked out of the pandemic. Of course, I lost a lot of things as well, including my own mother who passed away during the pandemic. But artistically, I walked out the pandemic being a composer that has more things to say, has more angles to look at the world, has more ideas to, and more ways to tell my story and tell other stories. So that was the experience of creating A Dust in Time and the journey of working together on that.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about your process. So when you begin working on a piece like Angel Island, do you start with the music? Do you start with an idea? Do you start with some theme, a feeling, text? How do you begin?
So like many of my other works, I always start with the large picture, the structure first. It's like building a house. You need to know how big this house or how small this house you want to build, how many rooms, things like that. So to me, as a piece of composition, I plan, how long this piece I want it to be, how many movements or how many scenes, and what kind of work that should be. Is that a song cycle? Is that a choral piece? Or is that a theatrical piece being sung and also being narrated? In this case, it becomes the latter. So when I was reading the poem, so this is another thing I want to mention, I felt each poem although they talk about different period of the writer's life on the island by different people, but they all had a very, very similar kind of mood and feeling. So if I just write a song cycle of it, I think it doesn't give me enough variety to create a larger scale work. But these poems and this subject cries out to be created as something bigger, larger scale, so that people could really feel it, could really see it. So my immediate thought was, what if I make that as an opera theater, which is what has become now, instead of just oratoria. Of course, we started as an oratoria, and so now it becomes something, it has so many ways you could describe it. It is an opera theater, it is a vocal theater, and also it could be a documentary theater because it has documentary materials in there. So I think for me, I thought of definitely the central material are the poetries from the war. But also, aside from that, I wanted to have another orbit or another narrative which will interact with the orbit of the poetry on the wall. So the other orbit is historical facts, historical stories, from articles, from newspapers, from account from people who witnessed them, to form a kind of interacting line showing the result of the Chinese Exclusion Act, the Page Act. And also because of this kind of discriminational acts caused what happened on Angel Island. So they are not irrelevant. They are connected very closely, although they did not happen exactly at the same time. So I want to show the longer span of the history and also to show the reasoning of how and why this happened. So then later on, I thought of the idea of having 8 scenes for Angel Island. And the odd number scenes, scene 1, 3, 5, 7, the narration and string quartet, and the material being narrated will be the historical facts and stories happening from mid-19th century to early 20th century. And the scene 2, 4, 6, and 8 are the vocal ensemble and string quartet section being sung out and set to the poetry found from Angel Island, from the wars on Angel Island, and have the chronological order of arrival, life on Angel Island, a funeral, and then departure. So it has these orders. Yeah. So that's the structure of Angel Island.
We've now performed Angel Island in some form or other in different presentations, about I think 6, 7 times.
Yeah.
And you've been involved in every one,
right,
in different degrees. How has the different personnel, the different locations, the different settings, and the different presentations, how has that changed, and what's the impact of these changes on the piece?
I think the beauty of a work like Angel Island, it is not a dramatic opera. It doesn't have a lead singer portraying a lead character. It is, in a way, it is an open-ended book that allowed collaborators to add on their own artistic input. So when we have different platform and different way to showcase Angel Island, I collaborated with various artists, from director to choreographer to videographer, and I think each end result is different from one another, which is the beauty of Angel Island. It could be taken into different focus. In our New York premiere with BAM's Next Wave Festival and Prototype Festival, with our director Matthew Ozawa and choreographer Rena Butler, their vision is to create a community, to show the strength of the community. They are the singers. They are portraying the detainees on the island, the people whose life got affected. So that is a different approach. Also, it brings out different aspects of Angel Island as well. And when we had the other collaboration with Washington Performing Arts and the Museum of Asian Art in DC, we work with the U.S. Air Force Band, the singing sergeants from the U.S. Air Force Band. In the performance, they all wear the uniform, singing Chinese. And that also is a different collaboration. Also bring out a different aspect of what Angel Island is. Yeah. And may I also want to add, the purpose of Angel Island is a piece of art that meant to inform people about what happened, and ultimately is to create dialogues and to bring people together, and in hope that with respect and with dignity, we treat people different from us in a better way than what happened in the history. So in hope that history will not repeat itself. So that is the ultimate message I want to bring out. But of course, we can't just ignore or cover the history. What happened did happen, but through showing the reasoning and showing the historical events, I hope people could learn about it and to really move forward from there to see our world a little bit different.
When we began, our premiere of Angel Island Oratorio was with 6 movements, and in its current iteration, there are 8.
Right.
So what was your decision to expand and to add the other 2 movements?
So in the original 6-movement version, we ended Angel Island as a funeral. And I often felt, even when I was at the premiere of the oratorio version, I felt it was not completed yet, because the journey should not end at death. It should end with leaving the island, no matter it's going to a new life or being sent back to where they came from. So after our premiere, I also read about the news of the last Chinaman from the Titanic. There are 6 of them, but I focus on one of them, about his experience, which ironically is quite, it's almost like a sad and dark humor. In that sense, he was saved so hard by the last rescue boat. They saved his life, but he was refused to be allowed to enter the U.S. custom when he arrived to the Ellis Island to receive treatment because of the law, because of the Exclusion Act. So I could not imagine how Fang Lam, how he felt this person, almost you have hope and then suddenly the hope was lost. So that was the 7th movement I added. It's called The Last Chinaman from the Titanic. And the last scene or last movement, I chose the poem about departure. And the person who wrote the poem was sent back to Asia. So it has the feeling of loss, the feeling of sadness. Also, the last line is that it describes the person's experience almost like the Jingwei bird. The Jingwei bird is a bird that every day carrying a rock or stone, trying to fill up the ocean. So the person was saying everything happened to him is like useless and waste of, so much effort and energy, but doing something fruitlessly. So that was the poem I chose. But of course, I leave the ending quite open-ended as well. I have the vocal ensemble to sing and walk into the audience, symbolizing the departure from Angel Island. And when they go into the community, go into the audience, I also hope the audience will feel their story is also part of our story. It's part of our life. And they are in among us. So the perspective shifted. Of course, you could also symbolizing the detainees enters the public life, the American life, after they enter the U.S. also.
Throughout this process of building this production and this amazing piece, what did you learn about yourself or as a creator, as a storyteller?
I often try very hard not to repeat myself when I create a piece, no matter it's large or small. I definitely never written another work similar to Angel Island in the past and might not able to do another one similar to Angel Island in the future. And I think, part of me believe in fate. I felt this happened at the time and for the reason almost like, I was at the right place at the right time to write the right piece. I wrote it during the pandemic, and of course, so much happened to Asian American community during the pandemic. And you're almost like living that kind of experience from the poetry which described. So if I'm writing Angel Island again now, maybe it's a different piece. So it's something very special to me, part of my journey as a composer. But personally, I feel proud of what I created, and because these stories needs to be told. And when Asian American audiences came to me, told me how touched they were or how empowered they were, I felt I was able to do something for them. And when they look around, they could always point to this piece, Angel Island, as we do have a piece in the music and opera category that is about our history. So, yeah.
I mean, obviously the stories and the poems that you describe in the piece are specific to the Chinese American immigration experience. And yet the piece has, universal connections with immigration as a whole, right? Mm-hmm. Which is what's going on. We're still facing these same issues, in particular at our southern border right now. There's a lot of, complicated, the situation there is very complex and not very healthy. How else do you feel that the piece kind of resonates with what's happening in our world today?
I think not just in the US, there are also other countries facing the challenge of, do you want to close up your country or to help people in need, to welcome them into to have a new home, have a new life. For whatever reason, they have to escape or they have to leave their own country. So I think this has been and will still be a constant debate and choices for different governments, for different leaders, for different officials. But as humanity, as a collective human race, let's put it that way, I felt it is a piece about how we treat people different from us. So I want people to see and hear Angel Island, not to feel this is someone else's story. This is someone else's history. I hope people could see, although the story happened to the Chinese immigrants in more than 100 years ago, being discriminated and due to the Chinese Exclusion Act. But that history could repeat itself or even be worse and could become discriminating a different race or different group of people if we are not careful enough. So in a way, it is almost like a wake-up call. And I hope to inspire people to think that what happened in the past is as close to us as today. And it might point to the future if we are not being alarmed or careful enough. Again, that's how I felt Angel Island itself is more than just a concert or a performance, but it is a message that I want to share.
It's funny that we talk about some of the events obviously being 100 years or more ago.
Right.
And yet the detention center was only closed 25 years before I was born. So that's actually
1940, you mean? Yeah.
It wasn't that long ago.
Right.
And in terms of our lives. Yeah.
Also, because of U.S. and China were allies to fight the Nazis.
Right.
So there's a larger reason, a larger picture to close the detention center.
Right. And then
it's not just because of humanitarian reason.
It was convenient, and then all of a sudden the attention was turned towards Japanese Americans.
Right.
And the world's all, and then interned. And in fact, some of the Japanese Americans were interned briefly at Angel Island as well, as before they were moved to other places. So it's just like this very strange history.
Yeah.
Can you tell us like one or two things that really excited you about our production here in New York at BAM?
So this is the first time we are able to do it with singers, memorize the music, which set them free to be able to act, to be able to dance even with the dancers. So it fulfills the vision I had of making that into opera theater. So this is one thing quite exciting. And also it is a very inclusive collaboration. We have mostly Asian American artists, but also we have artists from other communities joining us. And so the message of building a community and to be more inclusive, that I felt is quite unique to this production.
Yeah, I mean, we were absolutely thrilled with 3 sold-out nights at BAM. That was just so exciting that there was such a turnout. And when we got to see the audience afterwards, they were It was an incredibly diverse audience.
That's right.
All ages, all ethnicities. I mean, it was just really astounding, the turnout and the buzz and excitement.
And there are quite a lot of Asian American audience each night, so which I seldom see happening in BAM. So that is also very encouraging. And I think that was also what the presenters want to see as well. What does that mean to present a production, a piece of music today? Who do we want to reach out to, and who are our audiences? I think all these big philosophical questions will only lead to more diverse programming, which is a great thing to see.
We've been now working together on this project for 6 years or something like that, since the conception and development and all these different iterations. So what's it like to work with Del Sol?
To me, I think every composer, historically speaking, they would write music for the similar-minded artists and musicians they meet, they are friends with. And in my case, I felt working with you guys, I share very similar ideas and visions, and it's a collective decision-making instead of you just commission me and then ask me to write one way and one way only, or I finish the piece, I send it to you, say, okay, don't change a note, and this is exactly it should be. But it was the process of creating that really interests me, and I feel this is what makes our relationship special. We each have our inputs, and I remember, during the pandemic, you mentioned to me that we don't know what the future of singing world will be. It would be great to create the piece in a way that could also be sung by 4 singers. It would be easier to tour it with and easier to put together, because truthfully speaking, with the pandemic, with the coronavirus being so contagious, we don't know when would be the future. We could gather a group of singers to sing as a choir, right? So which is very harsh, very real realities we all have to face. But it was great that we had the conversation. So Angel Island is written in 4 parts. So it could be done by 4 singers, and it could be done by 40 singers or 48 singers. So it gave the work that kind of flexibility. So so this kind of exploration, collaboration, discussion throughout the process, I think that's what composers and performers' relationship should be. Yeah.
I cherish your trust in us to offer ideas.
Definitely.
So what about the future of the piece? How do you see, what are your hopes for the future of this piece?
My hope is, in a way, it's like a book, right? You want it to be read by different people, and different people could get different meanings or different understandings out of it. But the book itself will remain there, being available. So Angel Island, in a way, it existed now, and I feel I have completed it. And as music, it should be sung, it should be played, it should be shared with more people, live or in recording. So my hope is this piece can be performed in different places, being shared with more people, so that they know about what happened to this dark history and what happened on Angel Island. But again, my hope is not to divide, but to bring people together. Because only when we know about the history, then we could see our present and could learn mistakes and to do better. So that is the way to bring people together. Great.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Sounds Current is a production of the Del Sol Quartet and the Del Sol Performing Arts Organization. Del Sol is Catherine Bates, Benjamin Creeth, Haegyung So-yoon, and me, Charlton Lee. This podcast is produced and edited by Andrea Klunder at the Creative Imposter Studios. Technical direction by Edwin R. Ruiz. Additional production support from Alex Riegler. Cover art by Felicia Lee. Our theme music was composed by me and performed by Del Sol Quartet. Angel Island was composed by Huang Ruo with generous funding from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, with additional funding from the Phyllis C. Wattis Foundation and the Clarence E. Heller Charitable Foundation. Special thanks to Andrea Fellows-Feinberg and Don Feinberg, who believe our stories are worth sharing. And thank you to all of our guests and collaborators in the ever-expanding world of Angel Island. You can find links to all of the resources and partners mentioned in this episode in the show notes in the episode description in your app and at delsolquartet.com/podcast. To learn more about Del Sol Quartet and the Angel Island Project, visit delsolquartet.com.